So I'm just going to go live this one time. The only reason is because these are my thoughts, and I don't want to edit my thoughts. I want my thoughts to be coming from my heart. Now, there's been recent events between Russia and Ukraine that's causing the whole world to go in some kind of chaotic mode. And what I mean by that, quite simply, is Russia has built their forces on the Ukraine border, right? And while they're on the Ukraine border, they're causing problems. Now, Russia and the UN says that they're not going to war. They never talked about war, that America's crazy, England's crazy, Europe's crazy. Everybody's crazy but them, right? But this also reminds me of something that happened before my time. Somebody might be 20 years older than me might remember John F. Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis, right? And with the Cuban Missile Crisis, it was a standoff between Russia and America because Russia wanted to build missiles on the Cuban territory right next to America. And they sent their warships out, and it was just like everybody was afraid that we were going to go into a nuclear war. The Bible does hint that there's going to be a nuclear explosion or some kind of mass event, right? Where 1/3 of the sea dies, 1/3 of the earth dies. There's going to be mass starvation. There's going to be people going to wars. The whole moon turns to red, which would happen if even a volcano severe enough exploded, right? So, biblically speaking, everything's happening the way the Bible says it's going to happen. There's going to be rumors of wars. But this is not unusual for things like this to happen in the past either, right? With World War II, World War I, for example. People could have swore it was going to be the end of the days back then too. So this is not a first time in history that this is going to happen. And by the way, I don't expect anybody to join. I'm just doing this live because it's easier to immediately upload to YouTube, right? Now, our world leaders seem like they're, I don't even know how you say it. They seem like they're a bit insane. They're sociopaths, right? They're egotistical. For example, Xi of China, right? Winnie the Pooh, if you want to call him that, whatever nickname that you have for him, right? He has replaced all the churches or torn the churches down. He doesn't want the cross, the Jesus cross, right? He is so afraid of Jesus that he won't allow anybody to bear his symbol. Now, if you're going to have a church in China, that you have to put his face up on the church, head of the church. And they changed the Bible to reflect communistic values, as they would say. They don't allow the old version of the Bible anymore, which the Bible says you don't do that. Now, in the book of Revelations, it does talk about a country with an eagle and stars. It says that we are on top. Who can bring us down? And God says, I can. Now, you can take that how you want. Most people think that's closely to America, and America is egotistical too. We all remember what happened with Trump, January 6th, when they tried to overthrow the Capitol. It still haunts me today. Believe it or not, I'm on antidepressants because of it. What I saw my fellow veterans do was shameful. But even when I was in the Army, I had trouble with people around me acting stupid. Most of the time it was my chain of command. And you go back to the January 6th riots, most of the people that got in trouble had some kind of significant rank on them. These were the same people causing idiotic issues in the Army. They were dumb. I'm not trying to be mean, but they were dumb. And, for example, right? So when September 11th happened, we had two soldiers I was sitting at a table with, two soldiers I thought were going to be my friends. But they started saying, hail, the terrorist. They were like, hail Bin Laden. They were praising Bin Laden. They said, it's about time. I was pissed. I couldn't believe two US soldiers did that. So I would be damn right I went and told. I don't want to go to war with them. I don't care if people are mad at me about that. And they got in trouble. They got kicked out of the Army. They had to do a field grade Article 15. It's going to haunt them the rest of their lives. They were branded traitors, and they should have been. But we have people like that in the Army. And since I got out, as far as I know, things haven't changed much. We still have idiotic leaders. And I'm trying to sit there and think, all through history, we've had great generals. And what made these generals great? other than the fact that they won, right? What made America great? Well, other countries have great generals. China, Russia, even the Philippines. And if you watch General Luna, the movie is pretty awesome. You realize how great of a general he is. And so we have all these brilliant people massing soldiers up on the Ukrainian border. People talking about war could break out tomorrow. And I was curious what kind of equipment they were bringing over to the front, because I know Fort Bragg just packed up. They're moving over there, which is mostly our special forces. Fort Bragg don't have a lot of heavy equipment. Most of the Russian forces that are building up are heavy equipment. They're tanks, they're artillery, they're mortars. Now, we could bring mortars easily enough, right? Especially smaller caliber ones. But I didn't see a lot of tanks being deployed. Most of our tanks are, Fort Hood, Fort Benning. But we do have tanks over there in Germany. And maybe they did move it. So I'm not saying they didn't, but maybe they did. It makes sense to move the tanks from Germany, move some of the units to the border, right? So Russia's playing their little games, because while they're doing that, they're out in the middle of Ireland, in Irish waters, and the people from Ireland that fish plan on blockading their war games over there. They were never allowed permitted. And that seems to be a global trend and problem right now between Russia and China, right? Even here in the Philippines, we got leaders still talking about China as their friend. And it's puzzling. It's puzzling. Because China is attacking you and you're sitting there calling them a friend. Would a friend come up and just flat out hit you? Because that's what's going on. And at one time, I thought maybe China could be a great ally to the United States. Back in 2010, I always swore China could have been a great ally to the United States. They could have been a great ally to fight off Russia. But now it seems like China and Russia have joined forces, which makes some kind of sense because they both have communistic ties. I understand that Russia has a new form of government, but there's still communistic things going on, especially with Putin. And our world leaders, and Putin especially, thinks he's invincible. Ex-KGB, killed off a few reporters that he didn't like, interfering in America's election, which Trump up there calling him a friend. It's amazing how many world leaders are calling people that are messing up their country that they swore to protect friend. And I'm sitting there trying to think, why is this happening? It's like they allowed the devil to whisper in their ear, and it's just years of egotistical. And that's exactly what happens, right? Especially with Trump. Trump is a classic case of this. It's when you make poor decisions, but the people around you keep telling you over and over again, you're doing a good job. That was a great job. Oh, you're the man. You're the man. And they get this ego up. Like, gee, he's flat out demanding it, people, and put him in the head of the church. It's his ego. He thinks he's a god because he runs a country, even though he didn't do nothing for his people. They're attacking the poor over there when you read about it. They kill an old woman who lived in her house. You hear stories like that all the time, just so they could wreck it and build a condo there for the rich people. Then to find out there wasn't enough rich people to fill the condo, which is mind-boggling. So you got China's killing their own people. People are just tolerating it. Russia's been expanding. I think I was reading that 80 to 90% of their population is below the poverty line. There's not a lot of high-paying jobs. A lot of it has to do with economic embargoes too, probably, if you want to delve deep into that issue. So you got two maniacs, Putin and Xi, wanting to expand. And for those of you that really know a lot about World War II history, Germany tried to say Poland shot at them on a border. So they had this border with one of those crossing things down, and Germany tried to say that Poland guard shot it, which wasn't the case, I guess, obviously, right? And that's what's going to happen. It's only going to take one incident to spill over. And I know on the China and Indian border, Chinese troops are just trying to take it over. India didn't tolerate it. India's not tolerating. They're fighting back. They're not shooting each other, but they're taking each other hostages. They're taking each other as prisoners. They're beating each other with sticks and rods. People have died. China just wants to expand and keep expanding and keep expanding. Once again, you guys forgotten about God. So during the Cuban Missile Crisis, right, a lot of people were worried about nuclear war going off because Russia was nuclear powered at the time. It was at the beginning of their height. They were wanting to test their military. But Kennedy and his people did a pretty damn good job. In most part, I'm glad Trump is not in charge no more. That's great. Trump's not in charge no more. That's awesome because he's an idiot. Well, then you look at Biden. And as a veteran, I'm not sure I want either one of them. And I'm looking at some of these generals in our army, and I'm wondering if the same things happened to them over the years. That same kind of syndrome I was talking about with Trump. You the man. You the man. Even though they made bad decisions, they're wearing medals maybe they didn't earn, which happens a lot in the military. General Shinseki is one of them. Probably one of the generals I really hate is General Shinseki. One of the best things ever happened in the Army. It's not no more, I think. I think he's finally retired years ago. He really ruined the infantry. But who do we have that's a good general now? General Miley? He's good on some stuff. Don't get me wrong. He's smart. He thinks things out. But we don't have any war generals. Most of our military equipment's old. Russia just upgraded brand new tanks. They're brand new. Our Abrams are 20, 30 years old now. I think close to 30. Some of it's been upgraded, but we haven't had a new brand of tank mass fielding. We've had a fixed, you might see on YouTube, experimental tanks saying this is going to be a tank of tomorrow. You might see, but they never mass ordered. They're not replacing the Abrams. Germany has a pretty good tank. France, too, for the most part. Most people have a good tank. I think, what's that? I forgot the name. Challenger, even England has a good tank. I forgot the name of the German one. I think it's after a cat, but it's a good tank. It's a good tank, too, right? But people are massing armies on a border, and it's happening not just in Europe, but it's already been happening in India. But it hasn't happened in Asia as much. The Philippine government has really not done a lot to keep China out. They're afraid to start a war because, they say China's too powerful, so they're just kind of taking it in the chin. Europe's not that way much. They're not going to keep taking it chin. But from what I was reading, Germany seems to be split on the issue of Ukraine. Some of their own leaders, right? And so this is what I recommend, right? People to stop smoking, first of all. I tell you why. And to stop drinking in masses. You're going to need that money for food soon. If war does break out, let's say one nuclear bomb goes off and the world leaders decide that we're going to have to start fighting hand to hand. That was too much. We can't do this no more because we're going to kill our own people. Also, say a nuclear bomb goes off in a third world country. Maybe you can even say Ukraine. But that's it. Nobody wants to do nuclear after everybody's fighting back hand to hand. There's enough radiation. There's a fallout. And 1/3 of the earth starts dying off. Okay. I understand that part. But there's going to be food shortages everywhere. So you, especially in America, guys can start ordering maybe MREs online. Start stocking up on some water, things that you literally need. You don't need tobacco. You don't need all that alcohol. You might keep a whiskey bottle handy. You might be able to trade it, barter. I can see you doing that, but don't be out drinking all the time and wasting your money. Start spending your money wisely because if a war does break out, there's going to be rations in a lot of countries. A lot of countries have to rely on so much trade coming in because they don't have enough to feed their own people, especially countries like England, small island state, really. Even though it used to be a real power, still small compared to other countries, right? And that's what you can look forward to when World War III happens. You're going to start rationing. Some of you can't live off rations. I've seen some Americans, they got to have 6, 7 cheeseburgers a meal, man. And I've worked with people like that. They're just hungry people because they work all the time and they just don't got time to cook. So they eat 6, 7 cheeseburgers when they can. To order the dollar menu one. And it's another thing that might shut down. You might start seeing limited fast food too, which are going to be affecting jobs. For some of you younger kids, you're going to start talking about when a war breaks out, whether or not there's going to be a draft. So some of you that are sitting there day in and day out while you're in high school, even junior high, and you're sitting there huffing and puffing off the vaping, might want to cut that out. Might want to start exercising. Because if there is going to be World War III, this is going to be biblical. Some of you might be 15, 14 years old now. When war breaks out, we're going to be old enough and war's still going to go on. The other thing I'm concerned about, a lot of people are going to hate me for this, but the Russian army is tough. They don't do that feminism thing. They don't care about women having rights. They don't care about any of that. They straight up train tough. They'll kill their own people and train at that. They don't care. They're tough. They Spartan train. I know I can't stand this Texas governor. Most of you already know who he is. When he posted Russia training, then we posted that little girl in the United States Army. A lot of that's going to have to cut out. And you could be mad at me for that. But we're gonna need toughness when we go to war. We're going to have to sidestep that gender thing. We're going to have to sidestep that, this little feminine thing. A lot of you don't know, the United States Army has different standards for men and women. Russia has one standard, tough. You do this amount of push-ups, you do this amount of sit-ups, all throughout, not the United States Army. Women got to do significantly less, which means they have, in the battlefield, they do significantly less. I'm not trying to be mean, but that's just true. And I know we were in Iraq. I had some problems with some of the female soldiers. All but I think two. There's two soldiers I remember that were pretty badass that I wouldn't mind going to war with, right? And, most of you remember the movie Aliens with that one chick. She was doing the pull-ups. They're not like that in the military. Most of them don't want to listen. So during a convoy, when a convoy stops, you're supposed to get out and you're supposed to pull security. Everybody's got their zones. You point your weapon that way. You look person next to you. That way you form a perimeter in case something happens. Well, a lot of times a woman didn't want to get out of the vehicle. She didn't want to listen. A lot of times she might have been in E5, thought she didn't have to do anything because they're not infantry trained. And that's one of the problems I was talking about in the Army they never fixed. Russia, infantry trained throughout. Standard. Not in the United States Army. We don't have a tough army per se. And some of you are going to get mad at me for this. I don't care. But a straight ground war, I don't think we can win against Russia. Not without a really good Air Force and Navy, which I think we still have. Even if a female pilot, I don't mind a female pilot as long as she makes the same standards. As long as she does her job good, that's great. She should be praised. But a straight ground war, no naval, no Air Force, United States Army can't beat Russia. They can't beat China. I'm sorry. They just can't. They're not tough enough. Some of the soldiers coming out, they're doing more TikTok videos than they are training. I've already seen TikTok videos of soldiers, men, saying, oh, hell with this. They want out of the Army now. They're afraid of war with Russia. That's not what we need in there right now. You don't have that toughness anymore. You don't have that physical physique anymore because the United States Army doesn't do PT right. Some of you are going to get mad at me for saying that, but if the United States Army does PT right, then why do so many soldiers have to go to the Veterans Hospital when they get out for help? Because they're not doing PT right. Commanders ain't doing their job in the Army. It's just whatever they feel like that morning. Instead of having a set program, then in the afternoon having soldiers work out on their weaknesses like they should, going to the gym, building up their muscle tone, and building up their endurance. Commanders don't do that because commanders don't think. They don't have that ability to think. They're too busy in the office being praised by XOs. Oh, you're doing a great job. That Trump syndrome. Not in Russia. Some of you might get mad at me for saying that. I doubt if anybody watches this video, but it's the truth. It's the truth. I don't want the United States to lose. I don't want China and Russia taking over everything, but if there's a problem, I have to point it out, and we have to identify the problem. Now, there's a lot of problems. Like I said, it seems like the devil, the Antichrist, has gotten into Putin, has gotten into Xi. They're whispering in his ear. They're getting him egotistical. They're expanding the armies. And look, if you're in a Chinese general, I'm not trying to be mean, but maybe have a backbone. Xi has not done nothing for your people. See, in China, when you're a veteran, you're supposed to get job priority when you get out. So say you get injured, you're supposed to go to your province. It's kind of like the LGUs here, the Baron guys, right? But they're useless. They're not helping them. The number one people that start protesting China are veterans. They don't get treated the way they should. And as a veteran myself, that makes me angry because that happens in America a lot. So they're over there. in the Chinese army protecting a form of government that doesn't give a damn about them and mimics the United States. So you as a general maybe have a backbone against the Communist Party once in a while, maybe threatening them that, hey, we're not going to do this. If you don't like it, I got 20,000 soldiers sitting outside right now that will be willing to discuss it with you. Sometimes you got to put the fear back into the government. See, that's what happens when the United States first started out. We tried to have 3 equal sides of the government, right? Nobody was supposed to be stronger than the other. Everybody's supposed to check one another. Not in China. China's just communist. You do as you're told, or else. But sometimes that or else, you got to fight back. You got to get a little tongue back. You as a general, you're supposed to be protecting your soldiers, but that's not what's happening, is it? Same thing in the Philippines, right? So the Philippine government, their failure with Duterte, I know Marcos is talking about running. People are talking about voting for Marcos. They're sitting there saying China's a friend. What's China doing? They're attacking fishermen. They're attacking military supply lines. They're taking islands that belong to the Philippines. Why? Why? And you did nothing. You're sitting there calling them friend. Now there is one, I think Wilson, whatever his name is, the foreign ambassador. He's the only one that's been trying to do anything. He flat out flew out there to see for himself what was happening. I have more respect for him than I do Duterte. At least he was there on ground zero, which Duterte promised everybody, didn't do. Duterte said he'd ride a jet ski out there and plant the flag himself. Never happened. Never happened. Too busy with his Chinese friends. 1 out of 5 Filipinos don't have a job because 1 out of 5 jobs go to China. And it's a shame. So to get back on Biden, I do have some worries about Biden. Biden doesn't seem to comprehend stuff. I'm not saying he's slow. I'm not saying he's bad. But he relies on his generals, and a good president should. But there comes an issue where you need to understand stuff yourself. And you need to be quick in the mouth, and you need to understand things fully. Most of us that were soldiers, most of us that weren't even soldiers, understand that when we withdrew from Afghanistan, we should have done it right. Me personally, I wasn't even armed Afghanistan men. I knew better. Why are you arming the men? Their own religion says that they're not going to listen to you. They're going to treat a woman bad as soon as you turn your back. Arm the woman. That's who you needed to arm. That's who you needed to train. See, some of y'all thought I was anti-feminist, but I'll tell you what, if you're ever going to go to war with take over a country like Afghan and Iraq, the biggest mistake we made, not giving women guns, and them only. Making it illegal for men to have a gun, giving the women the power. That's how you affect change. That's our biggest mistake. So Biden relied on his generals and Pentagon. They had their little think tanks and they didn't think things out. Unfortunately, those people are still in power. From what I was reading, nobody's been relieved. Nobody's been reprimanded. It's just been oh big well. It's common sense. You pull out slowly. You take the people that are important with you. You shouldn't leave any military equipment, even if it costs more to bring home. You don't ever leave anything for the enemy. They sit there and said that we destroyed some stuff. Well, they replaced a lot of it. You didn't destroy it good. You need to incinerate it if you're going to destroy it. You burn it down to the metal itself. You don't leave nothing for the enemy. It's common sense. Nothing. So our military didn't use their brain one time, but we're stocking up on the border with Russia. How can we go to war with Russia and we haven't learned anything? Same people are in power making decisions. And that should concern some of you. So next election, we don't have a good military leader either. And to give you an example of just how bad officers are, there is this thing called IOBC, Infantry Officer Basic Course. It's kind of like basic training, but it's for officers. That's what it is, right? The officers that I've seen when I played out for, which is the enemy, we're supposed to be there for them to learn to practice shooting. The officers, when I was at Fort Benning, were god awful. They were lazy. They were incompetent. They were stupid. And there's supposed to be a thing called range cadre. So you see people with a thing around their arm. Those are like the referees. So when you do war games, those are the referees that decide stuff. Well, they always decided stuff into the officer's favor, and it didn't do them any favor. So I'll give you an example. So we were in our Bradleys, right? and the officers are up on this hill, and they're supposed to do an ambush practice. So we pulled up Bradleys over, and they fire some rockets. The Bradleys drop the Rannis, we jump out. And so I was in the last Bradley, and I remember coming out, and you can see the muzzle flashes. It didn't take long, and the muzzle flashes were shooting straight. So they're up on a hill. We're down here with the Bradleys driving, so we stop, ramp jumps down, we come out of the back of the Bradleys, and I can clearly see their muzzle flashes weren't even aiming at us. They were just lazily shooting. But what I did notice was the far left, how far the left thing was. So I went up the hill on the far left, didn't get shot. I'm the one that made it up. The rest of my squad did die because they stood up and ran right toward, I don't want to get on that, Sergeant Kiefer and I think, oh man, there was Sturgio was another one, Specialist Sturgio. What a freaking idiot he was. So Sergeant Kiefer had a big ego. Very horrible field soldier, didn't want to listen. Just walked around praising himself all the time. And if you challenged him, he'd threaten you with paperwork. Anything but a man, right? So I made it up the hill, and I go shooting bunkers. So they made these bunkers. They're shooting forward, but they didn't put no rear guard. They didn't have nobody watching their back. So they put everything forward. So I went one bunker after another. Bam, bam, bam. You can hear the Miles gear going off. Everybody was pissed at me. Sergeant Major comes over. I get yelled at by him. They tested my Miles equipment. They want to know how I lived. And I explained, I just went up the hill. I saw where they were shooting, and I didn't go where they were shooting. It's common sense. But they all got mad at me. They didn't learn anything, did they? They didn't learn anything. How could they learn anything? Right? Where this mic's even on? That would suck to do this whole video and the mic ain't even on. Oh, well. Yeah, okay, it's on. But that's what it's like. So they didn't learn the things they needed for. Matter of fact, one time in LBC training, it was the next day, there was an officer. I kind of liked him. He was a funny guy. So he was in a bunker, and I guess they didn't have enough food. He was a big guy. He was like 6'6", bigger than me. And you could tell he probably needed a little more food than everybody else. So I had Pop-Tarts. I always carry Pop-Tarts with me. So I threw him some Pop-Tarts, and he surrendered. And most of the time, that'd be just funny. But, you know, from what I understand from my infantry officer basic course, they're not hard on him. They praise him too much. Even when we were inside a mount. So there's a mount setting where the officers are supposed to come out of the woods. We are in buildings. They're supposed to attack the buildings. Again, I live. They ask, how did I live? I watched where the muzzle flashes were going, and I make sure I wasn't in front of that muzzle flash. It's common sense. Once again, I get yelled at for not dying. I'm sorry. I'm a good field soldier. I'm not going to die just to praise the infantry. So these infantry officers, they didn't learn nothing valuable. So 20 years later, next thing you know, we're pulling out of Afghan all wrong. I wonder why. It takes 20 years to become a decent leader that makes decisions at bases, Pentagon. So those officers that were an infantry officer course that year that didn't learn nothing are the ones making decisions now. That should scare some of you. I could tell you one story after another about how just bad officer pool is. The officer pool right now is pretty damn bad. Think about it this way. This is how stupid the United States Army is. So you have an E6 sergeant, which is a staff sergeant that's supposed to be command of platoon or an E7, usually an E6, not a lot of E7s around. And he's been in the Army 8 years maybe, okay? On average, maybe 8. It could be, some of you might know less, some of you, we'll just say 8 on average. So he's in command of this platoon. He's probably deployed twice already in his career, minimum twice. Infantry E7, infantry E6, staff sergeant. He knows things to do and things not to do, right? And there's a reason why they called Iraq the NCO war. It's because the NCOs were doing all the work while the officers were doing nothing. And you can legitimately look that up online. So, but somebody coming straight out of college goes through the top school. Wow, what's that school called? I forgot already. My mind. Anyway, you know, everybody knows the top school I'm talking about. Trained for officers. Never even deployed. Barely held a weapon his whole life. Really good at textbooks, maybe. Could give a PowerPoint presentation really well. But he's supposed to take charge of that platoon as an officer. How stupid is it for the United States Army to put officer in charge of a platoon, straight out of college, no experience. But the E6 has to take his orders from him and lead, while that officer won't even be with his men. It's pretty stupid. The United States Army, what they should have done, I've preached this 100 times, is you need to make the rank of E5 first before you even think about becoming an officer. That way you earned it. The men will respect you more. I had a bunch of people get mad at me for this too. Just because somebody's saluting you in the Army, they don't mean they're saluting you. It just means they don't want to hear your mouth. Yes, sir. Get out of my face, sir. There's a difference between this and, say, an XO or an officer did do his job, saved a bunch of men's lives, where you want to walk up like, thank you, sir. There's a big difference between yes, sir, and yes, sir. Big difference. We don't have the proper officers. We don't have the proper base commanders. I'm not trying to be mean, to handle war with Russia. And it's deep concerning to me. And it should be concerning to a lot of people out there. So once again, this is not unusual for this to be happening through history. Okay? This is not unusual for armies to mass. It's not unusual for world leaders to act sociopaths, dummies, if you want to call them that, because that's what they are, dummies. Let me check something real quick. Oh, come on, load. Okay, never mind. That's what they are. These world leaders are willing to risk us soldiers, civilian lives for their egos. Putin don't care about how many people he's going to get killed. He don't care if a war accidentally does start off. It could be accident. You know what it would take for an artillery on the Russian side for some idiot to either load it wrong, misunderstand instructions, or the artillery had to fire across the border towards the Americans or the Germans, whoever's massing over there, to go off and kill them. There's going to be an immediate response. They're going to think war's happening. There's going to be immediate return of fire. It's only going to take one incident, and that'd be Putin's fault for stacking up those troops. And there's another thing. This is pissing me off. A lot of people don't understand history because you don't read anymore. You're too busy on TikTok, too busy YouTube. Well, not on my YouTube channel, which I've told everybody 100 times. This is Joe's Corner. Don't want to subscribe, don't want to like, then don't. I'm not going to beg. If I have 0 subscribers, oh well. I'm not doing this for attention. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing it because it's my thoughts. Most of the time, I'm correct. And the reason why I'm correct is because I think things out. Reason why I'm correct is because sometimes I've been wrong in the past and somebody brought new evidence to me, and I'm not afraid to be wrong. So say I make a decision and I didn't think about everything, which just happens to everybody. We're human. Somebody comes on and says, hey, what about this evidence here? I'm like, wow, I didn't know about that. That's interesting. I recalculate. And over the years, you keep recalculating to the point where you get fine-tuned, right? That's what you're supposed to do. That's where wisdom comes from. Making mistakes and making sure you have enough strength to correct that mistake, not standing by it. But there's this thing that's been happening with history. And that's just, why is America even jumping the gun? Why is America the world's police? Well, if you read, ma'am, sir, whatever your gender makeup believe is now, it's because at one time we didn't. Pearl Harbor happened. America joined World War II late. We joined way too late. Way too late. And when we joined, it was only because Japan attacked us. It wasn't because it was the right thing to do. And we vowed never to happen again, because America stood by and they watched Germany expand. They watched Japan expand, and a lot of people died. And we vowed never to have our own country attacked again like that, like Pearl Harbor. So when we see reoccurrences of history, when troops are being massed, when there's weapons of mass destruction, when somebody doesn't know how to act, when we get attacked at 9/11, we tend to intervene quick. We have to, because we're trying to prevent World War II from happening again. You nick it in the bud early, and it won't happen and spread all over. That's why America became world's police, is so you at home can be dumb on TikTok and not understand anything, to sit there and say, to have the freedom to say, why are we going to war early? That's why. Because we learned we have to. If you read anything about history, you know that. I tell you, TikTok has got to be the worst damn thing. I won't get into that. That's another discussion. But a lot of our youth don't read anymore. They read quick stuff. They watch YouTube shorts, maybe. They watch, other stuff. But they don't read anymore. Nobody reads, per se. Not a whole lot. So people don't have the wisdom to access the information why some things happen and why we should respond the way we do. But we have, in our day and age now, the information quicker access than you would have had 30 years ago, 40 years ago. It's amazing how you can access the information now quickly to understand world events, but you don't because you're too busy doing whatever it is you're doing. Stupid stuff, man. This is Joe's Corner. This is just my thoughts that if a war breaks out, I'm really concerned that America is not ready because we don't train like we're ready. And if a war does break out, more than likely it's going to be Russian aggression, which means they think they are ready, which means there's going to be talks between Putin and Xi. And I'm worried about war spilling over to the Philippines because that's what's going to happen because China's already eyeing the Philippines. I don't know if America has the strength for both fronts. I don't know if they have a strength for one front, let alone America's allies. And COVID already bankrupted a lot of countries, spent a lot of money on stuff that we shouldn't have been spending money on because people as citizens didn't do what they're supposed to do. See, I do have some concerns. Man, do I. But anyway, this is Joe's Corner. Thank you for watching. Anyway, like I said, stock up on food and water and things that you need. First aid kits and stuff, some rubbing alcohol. Because there's going to be rations if war breaks out because there's not going to be a lot of trade because trade's going to be interrupted. And it's just going to be sad all around. It's just something you got to be prepared for because our world leaders are sociopaths. They're narcissistic. They don't care. They'll kill 3-4 billion people before they even flinch. They don't care. It's all about them and nobody else. Meanwhile, you're going to have to contend with God and what he says is going to happen. Believe me, people like Putin and Xi and Trump, they don't go to heaven. They don't go to heaven. They violate all the 10 commandments. Thou shalt love thy neighbor. Thou shalt not lie. Thou shalt not commit murder. That's what these people are doing. Anyway, thank you for watching Joe's Corner. You guys try to keep your head up for those of you that might actually watch this. Hopefully you might understand things a little bit more. Maybe do your research. Maybe think things out. Spend less time on TikTok. Maybe open up a world history book once in a while and study. Maybe even type in why shouldn't America be world police. Maybe you could start reading articles on both sides. That's what you have to do sometimes before you make a good decision yourself. Too many of you young kids out there think you know and you don't. And you don't want to listen. You're hard-headed. Then again, who isn't hard-headed nowadays? Seems like everybody is. Anyway, take care of each other. Out.